just want to start off by saying I'm Darlene Livingston. I'm the executive director of PA Farmland, but I'm also a farmer, a wife and a mother. And so anyhow, been there, kind of done that. And I do want to start out with a full disclosure. My husband and I began our marriage by picking out a border collie pup. We did a great job raising it and training her. But then we moved on to border collie number 2, who was a wild child. And although we never got our second border collie trained, we thought we could move on to kids. So we've done a lot of things in our lives that maybe we weren't totally set up for, or totally, ready for, I guess I should say. And I was never the perfect class mom. I was a class volunteer who messed up some dear child's artwork in a laminator at school. So I'm sure the teacher had somebody crying for them after that too. So, and then I went to my children's baseball game one time with 2 different sandals on, and my family could never figure out how I did that, but I set my shoes under the table and just slid my feet into them. And they were the same brand, so they all felt alike till I got there and looked down at my feet one night. So that's the kind of things I've done. And in miscommunication, we've done that too in our family. We created a sweet potato casserole that's still to this day known as chicken sex, because at our family dinner table one night, I was explaining to my husband how I had a conversation with a vegetarian about agriculture that day, because at that point my day job was with Hallmark cards, and I went around helping, and it was a flexible job, and that's why I did it. I went around resetting stores, and I met a young lady who I realized we were either going to be great friends or the worst of enemies, because she was a vegetarian and I was a farmer. So I was trying to explain to her, because I wanted her to eat protein, about eggs, that they weren't all fertilized and that sort of thing. And my son looked up and said, "What is this you're talking? What is this?" And I said, I'm thinking, well, it's chicken sex. I don't know, because I'd explained how you had to have a rooster, to have the fertilized eggs. And he's like, "No, Mom, I mean this dish on the table." Well, honestly, we still to this day call a sweet potato casserole chicken sex in our family. So, because that night it got a new name, and they're like, "Only you, Mom, would do that, right?" But they're the ones that to call it that yet. But so, I mean, we have, to say that I'm perfect in communication is really far from the truth, or that my whole family is perfect. We are far from the truth, and we're not. We will never pretend to be. And I guess I figured out one thing is that I can share some of our blunders and so on, but I've also have used that over time to try to help us do better. And I tell people I've lived with farmers all my life, because I was born and raised with my grandparents and my parents. So, been around them all my life, so I have learned a little about them. Next slide. And which is more likely to happen on your farm? I want to know whether it's A or B. Okay.
There's more speculation in A.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yes, we're having a discussion here, and it seems like the majority is probably B. And that's what would happen on my farm too. And I will tell you, we moved on several years ago. My husband managed a farm, and we moved to a different property there. And the kids went out towards a barn or something, and I realized I could watch the kids out the kitchen window. I thought, oh, this is just marvelous, kind of like my perfect world here, as we call it at home, my daisy field. That's my perfect world. And about 5 minutes later, the kids come in screaming. So I realized, my husband told me that night that, that perfect world doesn't really exist, sweetie. So in other words, we're in B2. So for the 5 seconds that I thought that, we lived in a place where I could watch the kids out the window, they were going to get along. That was like A, but that didn't last long for us. And I was going to tell you too that also, one thing I just want to remind you, I know we talked about not becoming an alcoholic and using drugs and stuff with the First Lady. I can tell you how to do that, and that's to use Tate's Farm Shrub up here in State College, because when we first moved back to my family's farm, it was a challenge, to say the least. I'll share just a little bit more about that. My elderly father had, been in control of his life, and all of a sudden we moved back. And I told my husband that my answer to not becoming an alcoholic was drinking tape shrub at night with my club soda, because if I wasn't drinking that, I might be hitting the bottle every night, and that wouldn't be healthy for me. So that was my go-to, and I figured too, again, I was supporting a local farm, so that was the other healthy part of that. And I just wanted to ask, do you have more than one generation on the farm? Because I think that's lots of times where challenges can start in the families. We saw that actually, as I said, 2013, we come back and started working with my father. That was my husband and I, and as you can tell, we were getting plenty old enough ourselves, so we asked our kids before we come back if they wanted to take over the farm, and they sincerely said they did. They were like 18 and 20, and people wondered why we were listening to them then, but it created a lot of buy-in, and we come back to the family farm, and that's just a picture of us. And as my husband realized I was using that, he wanted Michelle's phone number to talk to her, to offer a 15-minute rebuttal or something, but anyhow. After that, when that happened, I think previously that evening at the supper table, somehow we got to talking about sorting livestock, which that always seems to bring, at least in our family, I've seen tension over the years in that. Thought we'd passed that, but realized that just a few days ago we had not passed that, because that afternoon they were sorting spring pigs. Our daughter Morgan and my husband Bob were sorting spring pigs. And I thought it all went well, because I'll show you something he sent out afterwards. And here I realized that not really angry, but yet not really friendly, conversations were taking, or conversation with edge, I guess. And my husband was like, I wasn't upset, but it's just like the tone of voice thing. And my daughter said, until he found his favorite spring pig. And then she said his tone changed dramatically, and he seemed all excited. So anyhow, we were having these conversations, and I said, where's my phone? I should be recording this, because I have a workshop coming up in a couple days. Go ahead and move the slide ahead. So in other words, but I think the bottom line is multiple generations with multiple ideas and ideals. There's going to be opinions and goals and priorities and perspectives that are different. And next slide. So what could possibly go wrong? I think one of the things I see a lot of the time is we avoid raising issues because they are uncomfortable and they create conflict among family members, or we're afraid they might create conflict among family members. There's financial challenges, uncertainty about individual family members' abilities or future plans. Estimated or established family decision-making patterns, and by that I mean where Dad always made the decisions, so Dad's going to continue to make the decisions. It takes a conscious effort for us to realize that, and even in our situation now, we have my husband and I and our daughters back on the farm. It's we try to make conscious decisions that we know we're not the ones totally in control. That it's a community effort now, and so on. And that can be really hard for some of our really senior farmer generations, at least it was in my family, because all those years he had done it his way, and then all of a sudden there was some other people there involved in his farming business. And he knew that, he wanted that to happen, but it still didn't decrease the difficulty. And we assume what others want. That's another situation. We should always make sure we clarify that, because there's oftentimes what we assume is not correct, and it actually, you can find out some really positive things when you start asking people as well. Fear of an unknown future. The senior generation has fears, and we may all have fears when we start transitioning things, and we maybe are a little bit less clear on what our role will be. So working through those things, who's in charge of what, and so on, is helpful. Avoid making difficult decisions about asset distribution. I shouldn't call it a pet peeve, but this is one of my greatest, I see it as a heartache for families, because we don't want to make difficult decisions, or we want to make them in the easiest way we can make them. So lots of times that's when we leave the farm evenly to everyone, and maybe there's enough children in the family that it creates real friction, especially if it happens, they get the farm after the person's death, and then, somebody once bought out and there's 2 or 3 want to be on the farm, or one farmer is farming the farm but is having challenges being able to afford to purchase the farm from the others. And difficulty facing reality, growing older, and giving up control. Again, it's the challenges with the senior generation, but we need to be cognitive too that that's a really difficult place to be. And we all become more risk adverse as we age, and we resist change. And I know I see that in myself too. I'm sure my husband and I are not as adventurous in taking risk as what our children are. Next slide. But it also brings opportunities. More help on the farm provides ability to schedule regular time off. And if you haven't been doing that, start with an afternoon or a day, then move to a weekend and then a vacation, hopefully. At least try to make it more evenly divided. Our daughter is actually much better at work-life balance than we are. And I have found myself actually scheduling, a day on the calendar or a weekend off, because if I don't, she's going to utilize them anyhow. But she's setting a good example for us, and really our children have been saying, okay, Mom and Dad, you need to come up to bat. We know you need time away from here too. So that's kind of the way we're handling it, is that, start out small and then increase it. But it does bring opportunities, because they are showing us, especially our daughters, showing us what that balance should look like, and not what we've had it been in the last few years. And we have to relearn to get away, and I'm sure others have to too. It can lead to healthier daily schedules. The more help you have, the more hands you have there, the better you can divide and conquer responsibilities and share responsibilities. And the small things like accompanying a family member to medical appointments and procedures, that's easier the more people you have on the farm. So there's opportunities in sharing responsibilities on any farm. Next slide. But the challenges on our farms, really, when it comes to, communication, all that, why do we have so many challenges? Really, it's because the family is an emotional-based center of thought, and then you have the business that's task-based and conscious behavior, outward-looking, ready for change, and so on. And the family lots of times minimizes change because they want things to stay the same. But where those two come together is really where our family farms are, and you also get friction and conflict there, because you're putting the emotion into the business, to the business too. You're putting the emotion side and business side together. So it's learning how to work through some of those things. They act up more at home because they are the most comfortable there, which led me to say, I wish they weren't so comfortable at home. A child psychologist told me that when my kids were young, and I was like, I wish they'd act up for somebody else. And I found this to be true not only for children, though, but also for everyone. So adults, our senior generation, it's everyone. It's across the board. They feel most comfortable there, too. So I've seen that, too, where they probably act up in ways with the ones they love the most more than they would someone else. Communication takes time. Now, this I want to say is, to me, this wasn't a message I got. This was a text message. This was at 3:39 in the afternoon, and this was like, we were in a transition, but this was a good lesson learned, and to me, I was happy. This was my husband texting us after they had sorted those pigs with this was the exact text he sent me of what they found, and of course, part of it looks, like hieroglyphics if you don't know pigs or particular boars or whatever. But what it was, he took time when he's normally starting to do chores to send this text message to the rest of us, so that he was sure everybody was on the same page at the same time. And to me, that was a win, because it would have been much easier for him to just go start chores than to communicate that. And, in the old day, a few months ago, he would have just gone and started chores, but he realizes now the importance of keeping us all in the same loop. Him and my daughter, Morgan, as I said, had sorted the pigs. This was what their outcome was. They were telling us, and our son and I knew, also we're on the same page. And so remember to praise them when they do something like right, because I wanted him to realize that the time he took out was valuable. It was well worth it, and that we greatly appreciated it. So next slide, Jim. One thing I think that I've found to be helpful is start with short weekly meetings to discuss upcoming week schedule. Just the small thing of a week schedule, who's doing what. In our situation, my husband's full-time on the farm, but I work off the farm, as does my daughter. But, meshing all those schedules and so on, everybody needs to know where the other is going to be and who's helping with chores when. And mainly it's my husband and my daughter, but it just works much better when we sit down and have just a short meeting about that for the upcoming week. And, make sure we all know. I would say, too, if you aren't doing them already, add monthly farm meetings. They are extremely beneficial. And who should be involved? I think every farm's a little different. Think about it. Involve all the important players in my mind. But think through who in your family would be the ones that be involved. And maybe you have a senior member that you really can't involve because they're not really thinking clearly or whatever the case might be. I mean, I'm sure we had family farm meetings without my dad being involved when we first come back to the farm, but it wasn't going to be, there was challenges there, and we just had to have our own farm meetings. Meeting location, don't meet at your dinner table. Meet someplace else on the farm, or I don't care if you go to the coffee shop or, some other room to meet. Even probably Ag Choice would let you meet at their office if you needed a place to meet, or your local church or some other place. Rotate meeting facilitator for your meetings. We do that because I think it helps keep us all on the same playing field. Everyone is valued the same amount. And so we go through, and honestly, when we start our meetings, I insisted, I facilitated last for the specific reason that I felt like the others should do it first, because I probably do more of this, in a day job than any of them do, but it was important for them to have that same value. So, and meeting rules, if you need them, go ahead and set them. It doesn't hurt, because sometimes you can get into a meeting and maybe it's a little bit more heated than you anticipated. Maybe one person has a real passion for a certain thing, so meeting rules are always good. And I'm not sure if they're on the Wisconsin sheet, but there's some in the Farm Family Communications book too, or you can set up your own too. Go ahead. And as I said, a neutral meeting location. What happens when you sit at the kitchen table? Everybody sits at their more normal spot. So Dad takes his normal role as maybe head of the family in the family situation. Mom's in her seat and the kids are in their seats. But and that's not really the way it should be. This is a business meeting. This isn't a family meeting. So I like to get it away from the kitchen table. And actually, I've moved it to the living room or another room in the house even. Some people will go to their shop, and it could be a sawhorse if you want a table, sawhorse and a piece of plywood or something, but just sit around on straw bales or anything. And do have an agenda, and make sure that you cover the necessary aspects. Next slide. Okay. And I think I messed up. I think our slide's missing there, but that's okay. One thing we have to do though is to recognize, accept, and learn to work with others for communication styles. And one of the best ways I found to do this is, we're going to do a little exercise now. I literally, of course I have the day job, so I'm out doing other things. I went to a succession training event and did a communication exercise and come home and asked my husband to do it. And this was probably back about time when we were moving to the farm. And when he did it, and we had been married since like 1986, and this was like 2012 or 13. And we've been together all those years, but it never really dawned on me. I said we need to do direct marketing of our meats because of where we were at. We didn't have other markets and so on, and he didn't want to. He was trailing his feet and just didn't think it was a good idea. I had him complete the communication self-assessment, and we looked at it, and all of a sudden a light bulb went off in my head. It was really about his personality style, his communication style. That's why he didn't want to do it. He's, more of an introvert. I'm an extrovert. And to me, I was like, yeah, this is no brainer. And so what I said to him then was, I said, I get it. I'm, for whatever reason, I didn't realize this before. Howbeit, you take care of the stuff on the back side, on the farm side, and I'll do the front side. I'll do the sales with the public. If you handle the livestock, get them to the processor and all that, it'll be a good fit. Oh, that was a great idea to him. He liked that part. So we kind of moved forward in that way. But what I say that to say how important that some of these exercises can be, and that's why I feel like they're important to use, because just like that, we've been together a long time, and why that didn't really dawn on me without that, I don't know. So what I'm going to have you do now is, in the Farm Family Communications booklet you have in your folder, if you just go to the center page of it, where the staples are there, on the right you'll have a communication, a self-assessment. And we're going to take a few minutes for everybody to complete that communication self-assessment. And then the rest of your afternoon, to get your brains moving here, we're going to, once you do that, you can go to the scoring your communication style inventory there on the next page. It's essentially what you do. You have 2 pages of questions here, and you're picking one out of each group, essentially, of 2, I should say, statements as you go down through it, the front and the back. And then once you get to like 79 and 80 and have completed that, you can start scoring your communication style inventory on the right. Okay, so it's in the center. Go to where the staples are in the book. You center your book and it's the communication of self-assessment exercise. So I'm going to give you time now to complete that. We were talking, I'll just have a couple things I'll just go ahead and say before we kind of get back into this. We were talking earlier about sometimes it's the way we present ourselves makes a difference and so on things we accomplish with people. Well, with different workshops, I've used this in farm transition workshops, and I think the first time I used it, somebody said, do you really want people to complete that? And I said, yep, that's the goal. That's what we're doing. And anyhow, they said something to me about, what if it doesn't work? I said, that's plan A. We're just heading straight for it, and we're going to act like we believe everybody's going to do it. Well, that's just what our expectation is. And it was funny. It did work. I mean, people did complete it. I wasn't, you get all these farmers in the mix, and you don't know. But actually, the last time we did this, it was really cool because we had at least 2 generations in the room at one location, and maybe 3. But I got a text from the facilitator there, and she said, we have an 89-year-old man over here completing this exercise. And I said, well, good for him, because that shows his head is in the game. He wants to do this transition, and they did say that like his adult daughter that was there when she was helping him and so on at some points. But I was totally impressed, and my thought was, that farm's going to be okay, because he has a great attitude for an 89-year-old, because I will guarantee it, I had people younger in my family that I didn't have them complete this because I knew it wasn't going to work out. But, I say that, though, because a lot of it is our expectations. It's how we put it forward to people. And really, I've done that before. I mean, I've gone into things thinking, well, this is what we want to accomplish, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but this is what we're going to do, And we've done other breakout groups with farmers several years ago that we kind of did the same thing, but it worked well. And really, sometimes it's how we present it, or it's just how, this is what we plan to accomplish. And I think the same's true sometimes when we go about other things too. But what is our goal for some of these things? It's to help create more, as this slide shows, to create more balance in the business and family system, to try to bring some of these things together, to try to improve our communication skills, partially by understanding others and understanding ourselves better, and trying to learn where each other's coming from. Even if we've lived with them for many years, at least in my family, we didn't always have it figured out. So, some of these tools can try to help to build the trust, the commitment, the business, maybe improve business effectiveness, family harmony, and it's all important when it's a farm family business. You can move on to the next slide. So, there we go. So essentially, I know you worked through this. I know it took a little bit, but essentially, you come out with some ideas of what this particular assessment said and what this particular assessment shows that, what say you as yourself, what you like to talk about, the kind of the other sides of things, maybe, the people, who the people are. But also then, if you take that on to other things here, if you look at your style and so on, and then you ask other family members or farm members to complete this, then you have on there, on beyond the assessment where you completed, there's a coping with other communication styles page, and that can help you in working with them. And this is where kind of I was talking about at the beginning, my husband's the one who wants to be out in the field with his Angus cattle and doing his thing, out on the farm alone with his livestock. Our meats business, when we first started, we took a cooler, we had a table set up, we did it like in the upper left. You can't see it now, but the one on the right is actually my husband and I together at a farmer's market. That's in a trailer that we use because we moved to a trailer, and honestly, it grew enough that I needed extra help. And my husband went with me to the farmer's markets and so on, and he enjoys that side of it too. And one of his bottom line, so he got out of his comfort zone after we figured out what it was, and I acknowledged it and accepted it for who he was, and we started the growth. He got out of his comfort zone, and I applauded him for that. It is kind of funny sometimes, but we can laugh about it. When he first started going to the farmers markets, his words isn't, and my words are never perfect either, but one day he said to the lady, if you're any kind of a cook at all, you might like this. Instead of saying, if you like to cook at all, she got this really bad look at it. And I said, oh, he's used to talking to the cows. What he really means is, right? And we all had a good laugh because, it's like, you're insulting her if you leave it that way. But it was just funny because, it was one particular recipe he liked that we had there, and he was going to share it with this lady. So, we've had our own flounders and so on and our own challenges with it. But it's kind of interesting because now what he tells me is, we're rubbing elbows with a group of people we would never communicate with if we weren't out there, as far as agriculture, production ag people. We're educating the consumers too as we work with them. So it's interesting to see how he's grown outside of his comfort zone and those things. And people can do that, but I think, you have to be willing to work with them and talk with them. But I think the coping with other communication styles page is very important there too, to work through. Go ahead and move it to the next slide. Okay, and one of his lines has been, the greatest gift your dad gave you three was ability to work together to accomplish things. And as I said a little bit, my dad had a very strong personality. He was he was the man in charge. This farm he was on there every day of his life. That's where he was born and raised. And so it was his, and it was all his. And my mother was there too, but she'd passed away several years before. But anyhow, and it's right, when it came down to some of the more challenging times, after we got there, my dad got dementia. But as you can imagine, when somebody moves home to the farm and you've done this all your life yourself and it's yours, but he knew he had to do something because he couldn't be there alone. And so he asked us if we wanted to take over the farm, and we moved back. There was a lot of struggles there because he didn't want to give up, but he couldn't do it anymore. So there was a lot of challenges. We tried to include him. We did some things. The things we did, he didn't seem to want to embrace. So, I mean, we even bought a pig that was out of his breeding and asked him who to breed it to. And restarted a breed of the Hamps, the breed of pigs he hadn't had for a few years. But we tried to do several things. It was challenging, but the dementia was setting in too. But the one thing that my husband said was, my siblings and I worked really well together because, he kind of taught us that. I said, from sorting hogs together when we were young, because you have to learn how to cut the gates if you're going to get it accomplished, to doing the succession planning for the farm when he finally decided he wanted to do it. And like I said, we did it wrong. He was too old, we were too old, but we got it accomplished before he passed. And to his health crisis, that took mobile crisis there to help intervene and get him help because he didn't want to admit he had dementia. To distributing family heirlooms, there weren't any fights because we had learned how to get along together. And I think we were each willing to give and take, when it come down to it, to handling the business too, I think. But anyway, that's just one area where we had to learn how to work with him, but yet, it was doable and it was accomplishable. And honestly, we ended up better people for all that too. I want to go over, I can be a difficult person myself, but we have 6 common difficult personalities. I just want to quickly go over them because I think we all face dealing with them at some time or other. And I can probably picture people for most of these, and I will try not to give names. No, I won't. Anyway. And we have some people who tend to be bullies. Their motivators really are power and looking good. And they have a need to be right. They want to look good in front of people, and that's very important to them. So sometimes it's out in front of others. But usually what we have to realize with this group of people is usually that's masking their own insecurities and lack of self-esteem through attacks on others. And maybe attacks is a harsh word, but maybe it's putting others down, saying negative things about others too, but that type of thing. But usually it's really all about their own insecurities. And I'll be honest, I said my dad had a strong personality. He could be this type of person. And when I think back on it, I knew a lot of things about his life. And as he got older, he shared more. He had wanted to go to college so bad, it was pathetic. But he told us that back in those days, he could get a loan for livestock, but he couldn't get a student loan to go to school. And so he had never gone to college. And I think he always felt like he had insecurity about that. He was a very intelligent man, but he always must have had insecurity because one of the things he did after he had dementia, he made me promise I would graduate college. And I could promise that to him because I had graduated years ago. And, he was happy. And I realized then how critical that was to him and how that was such a huge thing that he never got over. And it was a shame. I mean, we could have addressed it better, I think, if we would have realized that that's what some of the other things were connected to. So, you can think through, sometimes you can figure out what the challenges are people have faced. Go ahead, next slide. Helpful actions, stand up to them honestly. That's what my sisters and I did together too. When we needed to, we always did it as a unified, group. But remain calm and respectful, even in the face of rudeness. And I do know there were many times it was dementia talking. Don't get me wrong, I do know that too. But I always tried to remain calm. I also set boundaries. I would walk away, and my husband was, the great guy that he was, he would always go back and deal with something if he needed to, because if my dad started being rude to me, I had learned I needed to leave because I wasn't accepting those actions. And I think that's fine for anybody to do because we all need to have boundaries. And we did, respond friendly, in a friendly manner. Don't embarrass them. Get the result by sharing the credit. Make sure you always give them the accolades for what they have done and so on. And remind them to be a team player at times, because I think sometimes they do just literally forget. And it's, again, their insecurities probably talking more. The gossip, they want attention and popularity. They want the spotlight on them, and they mistake belief that their audience really likes them because they are listening to their stories. And I think one big thing to remember here is gossips seek to make themselves look interestingly vicariously through the sharing of personal things going on in other people's lives. That was kind of new and interesting to me, thinking about it. I have a person that I know that maybe I can learn from the helpful actions now on the next slide. Just literally be honest and share my discomfort with them about that. I don't confide in them. I don't confide in the person I'm thinking of. I try not to share things because I'm just a little afraid of that. Will turn into gossip. And don't participate in listening to their stories, and defend the people who aren't present. I want to say too, maybe I can change the subject. Maybe, that kind of thing. In my situation, it's just somebody I know, and I just need to learn how to work with them. People pleasers, helping others and being liked. This is typically a passive person. They have a high need to avoid conflict, which we'll get into that some too, and a strong desire to take care of and nurture others. Upset by a thought of letting someone down or displeasing them. And there is a part of people pleasing that's not a bad thing. I think of it a little bit as kind of, like there's a gift of helps, really, and that's a good thing. But I think sometimes when you carry it too far, or it's easy to always want to help, and maybe, we need to just think about that. Helpful actions is to challenge their overcommitments, so they should be, willing to say no. Encourage them to express their displeasure. Coach them on standing up for themselves, because that's probably why they may be a people pleaser, because they're trying to avoid confrontation. And help them recognize when other people are taking advantage of them, and remind them they can't please everyone. So, yeah. The martyr, they're actually looking for sympathy and attention, and I guess this title here had me thinking of something different, but anyhow, they enjoy people commiserating with them and the tremendous hardships they've endured, derive pleasure from people feeling sorry for them and recognizing the sacrifices they've made. They need people to see what they've endured, but I think it's important not to dwell on those things that we've been through, and to help them. So cautiously offer empathy, say no to their volunteering, because sometimes they can probably go overboard too. Help them to manage their time better, to look at different things maybe they can be involved in, and do not fall in the trap of feeling guilty for what they've been through or whatever. Recognize any truth in their complaints and address the issue, because this is also, sometimes they may complain about something, and to be sure that, try to address those situations too. The complainer, misery loves company. I think some of the times these two can be a little bit, similar. Complainers have a tough time being optimistic. So it's one of the more, some of the most optimistic or pessimistic people I think you know of. The glass is always half empty. They bring people down by expressing their displeasure with the world. They spread negativity, and I think it's always good to point out to people, maybe in a very gentle way, try to help them see positives, and create an environment where complainers feel heard, because they do need to have, what the items that are going wrong heard, but listen without passing judgment. Assign them to problem-solving tasks, which I think is a good idea, to help solve the problems that they're complaining about. protect your own attitude. Don't turn into that really negative person as well. And set a positive example. I think sometimes by looking at the bright side, at the better, some of the things, same things, kind of turning them around for the positives is helpful. Okay. And the know-it-all, that's the really arrogant, I want to say accessible, really arrogant, accuracy and control person. Believe they are superior to others, and I think most times they can experience that you can, they kind of have this ode about them or whatever. And they're better informed and more experienced than others. They enjoy when others look less intelligent, etc. They also have a high desire for logic, data, accuracy, and precision in everything they do. They have a strong need to have things their way and will bully people to get their way. Don't be too quick to dismiss their ideas because they likely have some really good ideas. They're really into the accuracy and the data and all that. I'm sure, some of that is good. I like to, look at that type of thing. Acknowledge their experience. Know your facts too, so you can have a conversation with them. Point out errors with care and diplomacy. Try not to point out your own credentials and expertise. If you think you're right, don't let them dominate the conversation. So don't necessarily give in. But peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. And I think that's very important too, because definitely there is we're going to have conflict. So how do we handle it? Now, there is another, of course, there's another set in here in your book, and it's actually just before the one you just did. This is on conflict management style. And I did want to say too, there's some other personality profiles in here that may be helpful. Like there's a disc one here in the front of this book too. And I found that interesting and helpful too. We've done that in one of our farm family meetings for family members too, because it kind of showed me why people were a little bit more negative, because it showed me that I was working with some, on the disc form, it shows you how I was working with some pessimistic people versus optimistic. But anyhow, the conflict management style quiz, it's a little simpler, I think, than the last one you did, hopefully. And if you don't mind completing that, I do have more books here too, if anybody wants any extra copies of this, but to use with family members. But essentially, you go down through and answer the questions according to whether you rarely, sometimes, often, or always, I want to say feel that way, or react that way. And then on the other side, then we will review a little bit about the conflict management styles and what are the pros and cons of each. A little bit about the pros and cons of each one. Thank you. As you're finishing up, I'm just going to go ahead and start talking about these a little. Now, the collaborating style problems are solved, in ways that are essentially which result in optimal, manner. I think maybe a little bit easier. Both sides get what they want, and negative feelings are minimized. So, of course, it's a very beautiful style, and we probably aren't all. That's not all our main style, and maybe some of us are very low in that one. But, there could be somebody who is evenly represented in all these various areas. But essentially, that's one of our goals. It creates mutual trust and maintains positive relationships, builds commitments. It's time-consuming, though, and energy-consuming. So on farms, it's really hard to kind of go ahead and put this in practice. Many of us are moving too fast and too, hard to get this accomplished. Next slide. Competing style, authoritarian approach. It's goal-oriented and quick, but it may breed hostility. And one thing I think I tried to do, and I feel like this falls a little bit into this area, is authoritarian approach to me is kind of my way is the right way, and the other person says my way is the right way. Well, when working with my dad one day, we were going to tag and vaccinate lambs, and I really knew that this was going to be a challenge, so I literally looked at him going into it, and I said, Dad, there are two ways to do this, my way or your way, and they both will accomplish the same thing. And he looked at me and he started laughing. I said, I think we just need to get this out here first. And it was funny because it went much better that way. So I think, just stating that, sometimes making a statement, I wasn't trying to be negative towards him or anything else, but just realizing, we both have learned to do this different ways, but we're going to accomplish that goal. I think the thing about the avoiding style is that obstacles never get smaller unless they are addressed, and unaddressed problems, unresolved problems, only increase in size and create greater heartache. Families and farms are lost over them, and this is, the avoiding the tough conversations. To me, this is a little bit sometimes oriented to the time when they leave the farm to everyone equally, or, we just aren't even going to talk about that situation, and then, someone passes and then we have to do something anyhow, so then it's really challenging. So avoiding it just doesn't work real well. Harmonizing. Now I see this as, this is a person giving in to maintain relationships. It does, minimize injury. Relationships are maintained. And honestly, I have these pictures there because this is my family. And I think of this as being my mom. She was the harmonizer, and I'm sure she did it to maintain relationships, and I loved her dearly. And she was very helpful to our family in keeping them together, keeping everyone together, because she had to work with my grandparents and so on too, while raising a young family. But I think in her own mind, I think she did have some resentment about that, because she gave up at times because she just agreed because she couldn't really see any other good, solid way. So I think that was something that I think if she would have improved, she could have. I will say she tore the second kitchen out of our house so no one else would have to live with another generation, right? And so I think of that now and kind of laugh, because that was her way of solving that problem. Like, she didn't want somebody to do that again, and we've been doing it again. So anyhow, we lived through it. But so we kind of joke about that part of it now, though. But God bless her. She did a great job. Don't get me wrong, she did a great job. But I know that her most enjoyable years were the years after, when her and my dad were in full control of the farm and stuff, because she had an equal say. Compromising. It's a middle ground approach. It's useful in complex issues without simple solutions, and we know there's a lot of those on the farm. And while no one may ever really be satisfied, so less optimal solutions are implemented, but it's like my way, your way, but it's our way. So the compromise is our way, and hopefully it's something that can really be be useful on the farm, because I think many times we do have to go there. We have to go to the compromise. But, when looking at these conflict management types, I think we can help. It also helps us to learn about each other. The final thing I would really like to say is respect those who have gone before you, but don't allow ghost scripts to manage the farm. And ghost scripts, I want to say, are the things that ring in your ear from the previous generation that may not always make sense anymore. And I will say that they keep farms from moving forward. They can be detrimental to long-term viability sometimes, and they may create farm safety issues. So be careful of those. I feel sure that every farmer who's passed a farm on would want the farm to be financially viable and everything else to be successful, even if it meant their things had to go by the wayside. So